So at this point, we will go to our next panel. It's a great honor, as a young global leader of 2015, to host today World Economic Forum and United Nations, Margi and Elaine, two great friends from this network, and of course, Guy Platten, the General Secretary of the International Chamber of Commerce. Margi is the head of, Margi Van Kong is the head of supply chain and transport at World Economic Forum. Elaine Genser, responsible for engagement and partnerships development at United Nations, and Guy Platten, the General Secretary of the International Chamber of Shipping. And this is a great panel with a great friend also, because in shipping we are a big family, and we're all friends with Gina Panayiotou, CVO of Oceans Arena and concept founder of It's All About Shipping, that she will moderate this discussion to hear how the world is thinking of shipping, and after the Greek close discussions. Thank you very much for honoring us with your presence today, and thank you, Gina, for moderating.
Well, initially, thank you, Danae. It's such a pleasure to be with you here today. I mean, 20 years of this conference is like, I feel I'm a part of history, so congratulations. That's a great achievement. And thank you, of course, for the invitation. And I'm also very humbled to be hosting the particular panel with the international organizations such as the ICS, the World Economic Forum, and the UN, of course. But without further delay, because I'm sure we want to hear from our speakers, in order to initiate this discussion, before we go on to the topics that have been discussed over the past week and earlier today, maybe each of you can give us some details on all of the amazing initiatives and the role that each organization is pursuing in respect to the shipping agenda. I will start maybe with the ladies. Elaine or Margi, would you like to start? I see Margi already unmuted her mic, so do go ahead.
Well, firstly, thank you very much, and I echo, of course, the congratulations on the amazing milestone that's been reached, and Danae, to you, your family, and everybody that's participated in what sounds like a week of intense discussion, but certainly gives food for thought in terms of how do we move forward under conditions that are completely unprecedented globally. And unprecedented events give us great opportunity, creates enormous amount of chaos, which gives us more opportunity. And I think we've seen this in the past year. So I'd like to thank you, first of all, for inviting us to join you. And together with my panelists, we really appreciate the opportunity to explore a few more ideas about how we can ensure that the shipping community, which has been central to global development for all history, can continue to play that central role also as we look at how we transition to a future that enables our descendants to have a wonderful future to look forward to and to be able to contribute to off a foundation that we have to lay right now. So thank you very much. In that spirit, the World Economic Forum really does focus, and certainly our work in supply chain and the transport industries focuses very heavily on three key areas. One is, what kind of social contribution can we make as leaders under the current circumstances that ensure that future for our children and their children? What contribution needs to be made then in terms of the environment, and what kind of economic impact does that have? Because looking at sustainability in the absence of thinking about economics never makes very much sense. So I think we're very conscious of the need for a just transition. On the sustainability front, I think just bringing you up to date, many of your community will be well aware of the work that we are doing together with the Global Maritime Forum and many other key players. In fact, there are 178 in that coalition as of, I think it was the 7th of April. But the sustainability work of that coalition is built around the 4 primary work streams, each focusing on an essential part of work that needs to be achieved in order for us to be able to deliver on a more sustainable future, whether that's from a fuels and technologies perspective, whether that is from motivating first movers and how we can do that, given the massive investments that are required, whether it comes to how do we close the competitiveness gap between zero emission vessels and other obviously from a cost transition perspective, and potentially then what global opportunities exist for markets to produce fuels that are more energy efficient in countries where there is lots of wind, lots of sun. Greece is not least amongst these, but certainly in the developing world as well. So the sustainability work really does continue. And I think one of the key points that has been raised is how do we actually finance this transition? And one of the work streams at the forum that we are focused on with our team on financing this transition is really a set of work that allows us to deep dive, review what available technologies there are, build common understandings in terms of the actions that are needed to deploy the deployment of those new technologies, and what is the quantum of investment that is required. How do we work with the finance community to ensure that, one, those who are looking to make that transition are supported in that transition process, and two, there's sufficient finance available to enable that. So there's a number of work streams that are ongoing in the sustainability environment. I'd like to pick up on, one key event perhaps to look out for, which is taking place this Friday. So for those who are interested, it is Singapore's Maritime Week, obviously, and together with the World Bank, there is an online event being hosted, which speaks specifically to charting a course for decarbonizing maritime transport. The role of LNG in the transition towards low and zero carbon shipping, and the summary for policymakers in the industry are all rolled up into the latest report. There are two technical reports on those two topics that are being issued. And this event is going to be taking place on Friday, and we'll discuss the findings from those reports from a development perspective, and will be hosted by and contributed to by the climate champions for COP26, as well as the UNCTAD and ministers of the industry that are very important globally. So I think well worth taking a look at. It's going to highlight, current country ambitions, industry initiatives, particularly when we look at building up zero carbon bunker infrastructures based on green hydrogen potentially, and how governments and the shipping industry can work together also with the World Bank to create an enabling environment. So on sustainability, I'm going to leave it there. As far as really close to our hearts is concerned, crew well-being, and I hear with some trepidation that the crew of those who keep our goods moving globally, more than 90% of our goods moving globally, are second most likely to commit suicide. That is extremely concerning, and I think we all need to do what we can to ensure that crew change is facilitated. And I know that Guy is going to speak to this, so I'm not going to labor this too much, but this is where we, together with organizations such as Guy's, together with the ITF and multiple stakeholders in multiple countries across both the maritime sector and the aviation community, are now working on developing a standards-based solution to facilitate border reopening. And this is vital to seafarer crew change. So in essence, it is an initiative which aligns with the Commons Project and the Common Trust Network initiative, which we launched at the forum in June last year. And the solution that we are specifically looking at undertaking together with the maritime sector is working together to build over time a network now of 6 to 7 trusted crew change hubs in cities that have major ports and airports, and are able then to use this new technology to, in an immutable fashion, unchangeable fashion, be able to house the health data of crew who are looking to change. And our first pilot is expected to see the Philippines and Singapore as a corridor activated. And basically our crew change hub network is well worth keeping an eye on. And at that point, I'm going to close. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Margi. And actually, since I'm also aware that Guy will have to at some point leave us a bit earlier today, and you did mention the crew vaccination, which is something the ICS has been working very hard on. Maybe, Guy, you would like to step in, and then we'll move on to Elaine, with your permission, Elaine. So it's just that I'm quite...
Absolutely. Let's make a sandwich.
There's a dog here now, which is trying to...
Can you panel it? How lovely.
Sorry, she's going mad. She's escaped into the room, so I do apologise for that. Yeah, thank you very much, and really pleasure to be invited to speak today. And I'm sorry I'm going to have to leave a little early as well, but perhaps just on the crew change issue, and then we can go on a little bit about sustainability. But yeah, crew changes are still very much the forefront of my mind. In fact, meeting today, I'm also taking part in a special tripart commission at the International Labour Organization between government, social partners and industry about Maritime Labour Convention and the fact that governments across the world failed to live up to their responsibilities under the MLC during this pandemic and failed to do all they could to facilitate crew changes. And I think the work that's been done to try and get around that, including the work of Margi and others, has been greatly appreciated. But it's still a fact that hundreds of thousands of seafarers are impacted around the world from the COVID and the lack of crew changes or the difficulty in crew changes. And I think coming down the tracks even more so is the vaccination issue. About half of our 1.7 million seafarers come from developing nations who will have very difficult access to vaccines over the next couple of years. They will, and we are really concerned that they do not get prioritisation for vaccinations, and this will have potential impacts on the supply chain, particularly if things like vaccine passports are introduced later on this year, which will once again prevent crew from travelling unless they've been vaccinated. So it's something we're working very hard and lobbying very hard and working with a number of partners, including the GMF and others, to try and get around this and to try and get seafarer prioritisation for vaccinations. We do hope as the year goes on, as some developed countries have surplus of vaccines, that some of those vaccines could be used for overseas seafarers calling into their ports. And we're looking at particularly hubs, places like Singapore and others, who would be open their doors to allow seafarers to get vaccinated and to keep the world supply chains going. We saw with the Ever Given a few weeks ago just how vulnerable that supply chain is. And so we must do everything in our power to look after our crew and also give them priority for vaccines. But just turning to sustainability, I think this year's a really important year on the roadmap to decarbonisation for our industry. There's couple of key meetings coming up in the summer, MEPC at IMO, where very short-term measures will be introduced to try and start reducing greenhouse gases. But I think the big question is about the long-term sustainability of the industry and the absolute need to decarbonise. You know, we need to introduce zero carbon fuel ships into service in the early 2030s, and that work has to start now. So what Margi was talking about as well in terms of a bunkering system, all these things have to act in parallel. It's not just the technology, it's also the ability to have the right bunkering facilities there so we can transition, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's ammonia, or one of the other candidate fuels. It's no doubt that these discussions need to take place. And I think I sense it now amongst shipping companies. There's a real seriousness now to move towards this agenda of decarbonisation. So, with MEPC coming up, we get the short-term measures out of the way, we focus on the long-term measures, and we sort of move ahead on that sustainability. We call it here at the ICS the fourth propulsion revolution, because that's certainly what it is. We went from sail to steam to oil, and now we've got to move to something completely different, which is going to have fundamental changes to the way this industry is structured and the way this industry operates. So look forward to the discussions that will take place. So sorry I'm very brief, but I know you've got other speakers. Thank you, Gina.
Indeed, thank you so much, Guy, for that. Actually, quoting Dorothea earlier, this is a very exciting time and we should be blessed to be in the industry to follow these developments. Elaine, the platform is now yours. Please do go ahead.
Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for still being here after what I heard was a week of intense learnings. I'm grateful for Danae and also Gina for the opportunity to shine light in one important topic, I think, for everyone. A year ago, we were discussing through social media who was in lockdown or not, who were wearing masks, and even who had toilet paper. But the conversation now is different. The social media feeds are being filled with pictures of people rolling up their sleeves. They usually have a smile hidden by a mask, covering their mouth voluntarily or mandatorily to protect frontline workers. But these pictures miss to show also the hope that the vaccine is now a turning point to the pandemic, that life may and will get some normality framed by kids in school and new arrangements of working remotely or in our own premises and offices. But you know better than I do that seafarers and employees and crews in your industry don't have the luxury to stay at home. 70,000 vessels, sails and docks, representing 80% of volume is international trade, as Marge was saying before. So global trade relies on around 90% of carried goods through your shipping. And maritime transportation is the main provider for global trade, bringing your sector opportunities and challenges. And vaccination is just one of your challenges right now. Just to shine light a little bit on our work on the United Nations, UNICEF is the United Nations agency that was tasked by the Global Vaccine Alliance, named Gavi, ensuring that 2 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses can be distributed this year as part of the COVAX. COVAX is the largest and fastest immunization campaign in history, led by Gavi, WHO, and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, CEPI. And UNICEF is the key implementing partner, leading the procurement and the supply of the vaccines. And more than 1.2 billion of these vaccines are intended to lower and middle income countries. And why my colleagues at UNICEF? I'm not a UNICEF agency. I'm part of a different group at UN. But why are they the ones to do this? Because even before COVID, UNICEF was already helping the chain to immunize almost half of the kids in the entire world. So we were talking here almost impossible logistics challenges across the globe. UNICEF is today the only organization with the infrastructure, the expertise, the capillarity of distribution, implementation, and finally the buying power to lead this task. And vaccines are only part of the job, and it's only possible because UNICEF warehouses in Copenhagen and Dubai. UNICEF is also delivering 500 million tests, 250 million COVID treatments, as well as undergoing the helping billions to understand the virus, the prevention and the treatment through the programs that build vaccine confidence. So it's the beginning of the end, as many is calling it. Thousands of the healthcare and frontline workers, plus other high-risk individuals, are now receiving vaccines in places like Angola, Cambodia, Democratic Republic of Congo, the Gambia, Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, Senegal, Sudan. And we are hopeful that more and more people will have access to it. And behind my screen to you today, I can say that my smile represents the same hope as some of those people being vaccinated. I'll stop here.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elaine. And actually, it's such a pleasure that you all have quite a diverse kind of experience in this respect. So it's very nice to be hearing all these initiatives. And going on to the next phase of this discussion, some of the things, obviously, throughout this week that have been brought to the spotlight, and are recurring topics in shipping, of course, over the past year in general. If we could kind of categorize them, and I would like you each to again bring your input based on your experiences and your backgrounds within the international organizations that you serve, are, of course, as you mentioned and you briefly touched upon, and the intro sustainability regulations and how do we actually adhere practically, the funding, of course, of this new blue economy, and of course, last but not least, the human element and the well-being, the emphasis on the seafarers, and how digitalization kind of impacts that aspect. And I would also like to take this discussion a step further, and as a final note, have some comments from each on how you feel we can bridge this gap between the industry in respect of ship owners and the international organizations, if there is a path for stronger collaboration, or how can this be achieved. And I will let Guy go first, just in case he needs to close before we're done with this discussion. And I don't know, Guy, if your fairy friend would like to, he seemed to be quite interested in the discussion, but you're muted. So
I am sorry, I'm left dog watching. today, and she's getting bored now. So
taking the discussion seriously.
Guy, I think that she wants also her 15 minutes of becoming famous.
Well, thank you. Actually, I just want to just on your last point first. I think one of the most amazing things of this pandemic, I mean, there's lots of really bad things we all know, but one of the good things to come out of it has been the level of collaboration. So, for example, just to be in Margi there, I haven't met you physically in the flesh, but we've met lots of times by video conference on many different subjects. And I think that's the same with all of the agencies. And if I think there's one good thing that will hopefully come out of this is that we learn that there's actually got more in common than we have apart, and that we can discuss things and actually perhaps move the industry forward and far more quickly than we would have done otherwise. So I think that's been a real major plus from all of this. I've had unparalleled levels of cooperation with the International Maritime Organization, WEF, World Health Organization, International Labour Organization, and other UN bodies, and the United Nations themselves as well. So I do hope that really does continue going forward. So I suppose that's where I think of this real focus, is because there's so many challenges with regards to the crew, with regards to ships, with regards to digitization and all these other issues which have been discussed this week, that cooperation at a global level is absolutely vital going forward.
Thank you very much, Guy. Would you like to comment in particular on any of the other issues, such as digitalization and seafarers, or the funding of the blue economy and decarbonization you've already touched upon?
The funding, actually, so I was doing a bit of research in the blue economy, and it's quite a big topic to sort of to look at. But I do think sustainable finance and how actually we're going to finance a transition to the fourth propulsion revolution, how that's actually going to work. Because the investment is absolutely massive, not only in ships but also in the shore infrastructure that's going to go with it. So it's a question which it's not really fully answered in my head now, other than I think now through initiatives like the Poseidon principles and others are starting to slowly be addressed through the shipping industry. But I think that's something that will accelerate coming. When it comes to digitalization, I think one thing we have seen is a huge acceleration just even amongst how we do our own jobs over the last year. And you can see now there's that epiphany as well amongst ship owners and others that they need to invest far more in digitalization. I think, Danae, you were saying your previous conference, you had 3 companies. This one, you had 60 companies. And I think everyone absolutely gets that now. But all the downside that goes with it, including cybersecurity issues and all these other things. But the more efficient we can make our industry, actually the better for the environment as well. So I do see a real focus on both sustainability and the digitalization going forward. And I think crew welfare, if I maybe just touch on that, I think the other good thing that's come out of this pandemic is a realization that the heart of our industry are people. I think sometimes we look at shipping as a commodity type of thing, but actually deep down it's all about people. And I think to highlight the issues around in the crew, and to have the International Transport Workers Federation, ICS and others speaking as one on issues has been a great revelation, actually. And and I think there's an appreciation by ITF of how much ship owners have done and for trying to resolve this situation. So I think an increasing focus on that in the years to come is something I want to. It's a personal passion of mine as well. Being an ex-seafarer, I want to see that and to see that being addressed. There's no doubt in my mind that with further automation, digitalization, I think ships' crews will perhaps get less over time, and we need to make sure that they're looked after and their skills are looked after and their welfare is looked after as we move forward on all these huge number of issues which are facing our industry.
And we have actually already seen a great initiative by the ICS in this respect and pushing this agenda forward. One final comment before I move on to Margi and Elaine, I would like to maybe, if you could just, on the collaboration part, elaborate on, do you think that the ship owners have enough say at the moment? Is there something more that they should be maybe pushing forward from their side when it comes to this initiatives and the spotlights that the spotlight challenges that the industry is facing?
I think we've got a lot of industry associations out there, haven't we? And I think we need to continue to work together. And I suppose that's been the other thing is we host every 2 weeks, all the industry associations come together for a video call, which has been extremely beneficial because it meant that we've all can talk about different agendas and try and work together. But I think there's a lot more that can be done, as always with these things. But I think the collaboration that we've seen over the last year, I think augurs well for the future in terms of pushing the industry forward.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Guy. Margi? Margie, sorry.
Thank you so much, Guy. Also, just picking up on what you said there, I think the unprecedented level of collaboration is exceeded only by the unprecedented scale of this challenge. And I think to bring home very clearly that when we have a look at where our seafarers come from, we recognize without a doubt, and to Elaine's point as well, that vaccination of seafarers to enable the continued delivery of goods in a safe environment where well-being of crew is taken as paramount importance, I think cannot be underestimated and cannot be understressed. The responsibility that we as leaders in the industry have, that government leaders have, that ministers have, in terms of ensuring that our crew are safe it's unrivaled in the level of priority it should be given, in our opinion. When one looks at, and one can draw these parallels, right? I have not been subject at all to any kind of report that has come out of the recent situation that occurred in the Suez. But my immediate thought was, isn't it interesting that we have vessels moving through such a critically important point, and the level of concentration that is required from the crew and particularly the captain on those kinds of vessels. You cannot be distracted, not for one moment, in that kind of environment with the winds that are, prevalent in the Suez, etc. And my immediate thinking was, how many more safety incidents might result from an unrested crew that result in captains who, necessarily need to be concerned with the well-being of their crew. And this is an empathetic response. There is no real correlation via report or any other kind of status that I've seen. But it begs the question, are we asking an unfair ask of crew that have been at sea for a very long time, those who are going to sea, recognizing that they may not be able to get off a vessel in time to come home to loved ones as promised? How are we, as leaders in this industry, driving home the importance of addressing this? And primarily it starts with, one, ensuring that the protocols for safe crew change are in place, that the protocols for vaccination of crew who are carrying more than 90% of global trade are in place and supported. And to the point, Elaine, that you were making, the immense effort that is being made by organizations such as the United Nations through UNICEF in collaboration with Gavi and the COVAX. We are working, as you know, Elaine, extremely closely with the UNICEF team. I am enormously proud of being a part of a supply chain and transport industry that have signed a charter to support the distribution of vaccines in an equitable and fair fashion at a time where we all recognize that the constraints in capacity are immense, whether those constraints are in air as a result of so many grounded aircraft and a lack of belly cargo space and a massive demand on air cargo at the moment, or whether it is for the movement of all the peripherals, all the ancillary products that allow a vaccine to be delivered to one's arm, whether it's plungers, needles, whether it's the return of cold packaging, whether it is cold chain infrastructure in last mile environments. We cannot underestimate the value chain and the collaboration across the value chain that is going to be needed over the coming year to 2 years in order to ensure that countries are not left behind, particularly the countries from whence we have seafarers joining vessels. This cannot be overstated. So the people aspect is vital, and I think that everything that Guy, through the ICS, Stephen Cotton, through ITF, the task force that's been brought together by our partners in the Getting to Zero Coalition, the Global Maritime Forum, phenomenal work. And if you're not engaged on it, I would encourage you to engage. I'm sure that many of you are engaged, but this is vital for us. Digitization, very briefly, we are absolutely at an opportunity point here that is unrivaled. The technology exists. The question is, does the will to share the data that will allow us through an aggregation, through adding elements of data together, as opposed to being seen as a competitive advantage, seen as an advantage to drive forward trade through maritime in such a way that vessels are utilized in a fashion that's never been able before, because so much of what we do is paper bound, whether it's at a government level when we berth our vessels, or whether it is when we are loading, whether it is when we are engaging with our customers. We are seeing a complete digital, not evolution, a revolution in the shipping environment, and maritime informatics is becoming far more important. The importance of allying oneself to a standards-based approach as with interoperability, so that the standard that is used is common, the platform that is used is common, the information that sits on that platform is trusted. Whether you're using one app or another app is irrelevant, but the baseline needs to be the same, the foundation needs to be the same. And there are many digitization projects that we are working on across the supply chain and transport community, together with the teams from our cybersecurity practice, from our Internet of Things practice, and with respects to data for common purpose. How do we aggregate data in such a way that there is common good outcomes from that data? And I think we have seen that the aviation community do this incredibly well. IATA collects data from across the community of providers of air services. They aggregate that information, they interrogate it for events that then can result in better training and ensure the safety of crew and passengers. If we in the shipping community were able to do the same, can you imagine the results that we may get, not just in the measurement of emissions, but particularly the measurement of well-being of crew and how we use that data to drive policy in a different direction that enables us as providers of that service globally to benefit, because our people are safe and our vessels are safe. So I think digitization holds more opportunity than it does risk and threat. And the reality is that whilst we may feel that there's some risk involved in making that transition, it's absolutely clear we need to make it. The same, of course, is true for sustainability. And I think I've spoken quite broadly about sustainability, but just at a narrow level, when we talk about the transition, to a well-financed and funded green economy, one needs to look at very nascent spaces that are emerging. We at the World Economic Forum have an industry action group that meets every month at a CEO and senior deputy level. CEO once a month, every alternate month, senior deputy. And the discussion last week on the 13th of April was around the development of a framework to quantify how we can ensure that there's clear and transparent methods in attributing emission reduction and crediting first movers and rewarding them appropriately. Breakthrough Energy is one example of an organization on the finance side that is looking to quantify credits for first movers and ensure that finance is appropriately applied. So the reality is that by working together, we actually can identify how we can develop standards-based frameworks that allow for the credit of reduced emissions and accelerate the path to net zero. And I'll pause there. Thank you.
That's so exciting. Yeah, yes, of course, to go ahead, Guy.
I have to go very shortly, but a really powerful intervention, Margi. The one thing I was going to just say, it just struck my mind of the Ever Given, and you talked about the container ship and the crew, is we must remember the crew is still on board that ship. They haven't been allowed to leave yet. And one thing we must fight for is about the criminalisation of the seafarer, because they happen to be there, that they're not then used as pawns in a wider game here. And I think that's something that we've seen time and time again over the last few years.
Before leaving, Guy, very important. It's more than ever the need to be all in the same table.
Yeah, exactly.
So the ship owners also, I'm coming from Greece, and I have to mention it. We have to mention it. It's also very, very important. Everybody on the table, and the Ever Given gave this. Thank you very much for being with us.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. We have to be together on this one. And that's the point I was trying to make. But thank you, Danae, and thank you
It was
very
an
much.
honor to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Indeed, Guy, thank you so much. And this is a discussion in itself, the criminalization. So maybe in another Navigator forum, we should be addressing it for sure. Thanks so much, Guy. Elaine, the floor is now yours. Last but of course not least, just to make it clear that it was a matter of coordination.
Oh, that's fine. And I have a tough.
Guy, I think Elaine,
you know,
Guy could not afford, we are so many women in this panel, although we're only 1% in shipping. So Guy had to leave the women alone to speak about shipping.
That is funny. So yeah, I have a tough, beginning to follow, because we were talking about vaccines and now we are talking about another big element for the UN, that is sustainability and the environment. So allow me to go a little further on my thoughts that, as I said before, the maritime transportation is the main provider for global trade and therefore the global economy. But the global shipping is also responsible for a big dent in the cost to the environment. So people pay attention to that. And of course, this comes to the discussions. 300 million tons of fuel every year is used to transport these goods, representing 3% or almost 3% of the total global emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. But this share can triple by 2050 because demand for global freight is increasing, and it will increase more, forcing the maritime trade volumes to skyrocket. And beyond the environment, the current emissions are already being linked to thousands of premature deaths in coastal areas. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those things and going through sustainability, decarbonization, technology and digitalization, and hopefully in the end, some comments about what we expect in terms of collaboration in among the multilaterals and the industry. So your sector and others, not only yours, has both the challenge and opportunity to innovate and find solutions that address people's needs. And here we need to address what you are hearing from the United Nations and other multilateral agencies to financing and finance institutions about decarbonization. It is a challenge and an opportunity. So some of my silly comments here that I'm not specialized in environmental decarbonization, but a lot of people get very worried and comment about how richer Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos became last year. And let's turn the focus a little bit from the size that Amazon reached, the 1.5 trillion in value, but instead let's learn from some lessons that seems to drive their success, how technology and digitalization, and as Margie was saying, data, helped overcome the challenges in their industry, because it's not a easy path for them either. And I dare to say not to use the technology only to rejuvenate, but also innovate, because it's not only how you update your current technology into a new one, but you also innovate and bring new things. How to study and develop your sector scenarios to develop your commercial and operation strategy. So it's hopefully common sense that climate change is real and need action. Does not matter where you are and what sector you represent. In particularly you, with the need for the so-called zero carbon shipping, we will need to transition towards cleaner operations. And this can be achieved only if multi-stakeholders collaborate and work together to innovate and benefit the planet's environment, plus customers and shipping companies. I mean, everybody's together in the same ship. I'm sorry, my joke. And the demand for decarbonization in shipping is forcing the developing the energy and technical solutions for the supply. The demand from, number one, the customers that want green transportation, even willing to pay a premium for this new way of doing their business, which includes processes that certify, document, and verify the sustainability of the whole supply chain. Number two, your employees that demand the responsibility and the leadership of their companies. And finally, number three, the new generation of investors and future employees, you're calling for effects action towards sustainability. And why do I bring the new generation of investor to the discussion? Here's where the blue economy plays a role, because blue finance is a highlight nowadays in this type of business, and both coastal and other ocean-related investments, because not only renewable energy will become scarce when all sorts of transportation demand for it, but also when investors demand a sustainable investment. 2050, or in the next 30 years, will go faster, and a lot of change will happen, not only in your industry, but all the other ones. And investors are working on the definitions of the net zero portfolios, issues around the measuring of their carbon footprint as of a portfolio, how they are investing their funding, including things that I don't understand, or I don't have the details, the scope 1, 2, and 3 of emissions exposure on their framework, and the climate change metrics and data solutions for identifying climate risks and opportunities. So, but there's no shoe fits all here. There are several types of clean fuels. We know that, from hydrogen to ammonia to methanol and ethanol. I'm Brazilian. I grew up in the 80s when sugarcane was suddenly being used to produce ethanol to replace gas in cars when the oil price skyrocketed. And of course, there are the biofuels and the solar, wind, hydro, nuclear energy to be researched and adapted and used by your industry and others. So it's not only about to decide what size of ships to transport bulk or tank right now. It's how to replace or adapt the current fleet of 70,000 vessels in one or a multi-fuel option. And it's not only if you own or operate your assets, but the kind and size of the vessels you have, or which region you operate in. You now need to find the customer base that is willing to pay the premium to get the zero carbon transportation. So this awareness takes time and resources. So we're still in the financing world, how to take advantage of the search for decarbonization of portfolios in the net zero and green investors come to play for you. And the public sector is making money available at lower rates to buffer some of these risks. And I like that, I think was Guy saying or Margi was saying to reward the first movers on this. It is cheaper money for some of the risks that you're doing your transition. So if the sector sets ambitious targets, you measure it, and you have the right incentives, you're all up for, you know, a bumpy but surely transition road ahead soon. And the customers want it. The energy resources and technology are available, and financing for investment is available. So there is a need for, you know, demonstrating projects, pilot, early stage projects that transport maritime cargo using these zero carbon fuels and technologies. And this is a new way of doing business for you. And just to mention a couple of colleagues in the multilateral world, EBRD, the European Developing Bank, has committed to dedicating most of its investments, so over more than 50%, to support the transition to a green economy by 2025, so in 4 years. The alignment with the Paris Agreement would commit the bank to only making investments consistent with the goals of the 2030 agenda, namely holding the increase in the global average temperature to well below the 2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels, and pursuing efforts to limit that increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the president, Renaud Basso, said, we are putting our full weight behind the net zero transition. And just 2 weeks ago, my colleagues at the World Bank here in the DC area, at the close of their spring meetings with the IMF, the World Bank stressed that the strong international coordination is urgently needed to contain the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, to resume progress towards the developing goals, and to create the groundwork for green, resilient, and inclusive development. So here comes the collaboration thoughts that you're not alone. I mean, your industry is not alone, it's a challenge, but of course, the global regulation is needed to align all your players, the players in your sector. And here is where working closely with the UN member states and the International Maritime Organization is necessary. It's public knowledge that, you know, Asian countries like China, Korea, Singapore, and Japan want to step ahead and lead the drive towards zero carbon shipping. It's a matter of short time to see larger commercial vessels announcing their decarbonizing efforts from methanol to ammonia. And the future energy use, including the diversification, the cutting edge pollution, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, is to play. You need to, you know, start working on that. Or of course, you're already working on that, but the new technology options currently available, the status of their adoption, and the government plans aimed at influencing future developments in the sector. So while existing ships are running partially on green fuels already, new ships will be built with a zero carbon multi-fuel capability. Green fuels will be produced at scale, and port infrastructure will need to be outfitted or retrofit so that these ships can be refueled with green energy on the ports. So good luck.
Thank you very much, Elaine, for that. Unfortunately, with that, we're running out of time. I understand. I see Danae there is counting the minutes, but this discussion could go on for so many hours. I mean, it's so enlightening. It's been so enlightening. Thank you very much, both Margi and Elaine, and of course, Guy, for being with us. And thank you again, Danae. And I would like to personally wish the Navigator for many more years of leading change. So thank you for giving us this opportunity.
I also thank you, and it's very important to mention that I am part of the World Economic Forum family the last 6 years. I thank them very much for bringing together many words that I did not know. So Margi, thank you very, very much for supporting Navigator for second time. Elaine, we're cooperating into crime. We're YGLs. Many years. You used to be in World Bank. You are now in United Nations. And Gina, also a big thank you for having such an important discussion. The dialogue will continue, and let's hope next time in Athens. Margi, Elaine, Gina, thank you very, very much for the honor to be with us.